The Until Dawn remake was just officially released a couple days ago on PlayStation 5. There are so many new differences between this version and the 2014 version, and in this video I'll be going over all the major changes made to the game. This Until Dawn remake had been teased for so long, and so many people were curious about whether there was going to be any different endings, different deaths, how different it was going to be, how similar it would be to the original story. And it finally came out on October 4th for anyone who pre-ordered the game. I was able to play it that day, and honestly, I was surprised by a lot of the differences that they had. I was a little worried that they were going to majorly change the story and that wouldn't have made sense. I was a little confused about what they meant by a remake. They announced before they released it that the graphics would be severely different, that there would be new areas, new collectibles, and just a couple of different things to minorly change it. But while playing this game, I was so surprised by how many different things I was able to find. I played the original Until Dawn quite a few times. I know it pretty well, so I was able to catch anything that really wasn't exactly the same. For someone who doesn't know the game really well, it probably looked the same as the old version, except the graphics were just so obviously different. But there were some major changes made to this version that I didn't expect them to make. This game has only been out for a little bit, so people are still discovering some of the changes they made, and there are so many changes. Like, there are so many camera angles that are different, or just little tiny details that you couldn't possibly name in one video. So for this video, I'm going to be going over all the major changes I noticed, and there's probably a chance that I'm missing some because, again, it just came out. There's so many different things. So if there are any things I missed, please let me know in the comments below. The first major difference I noticed that everyone already knew about was the graphics. I mean, it was insane. If you look at the old 2014 version of Until Dawn, some of the graphics were not that great. They were really good for the time, but not super great. I think the only thing missing from the 2014 version was that the graphics were just not the best that they could be now. So the fact that they fixed that was like the last step that they needed to take to make this game perfect. The place that I really noticed the graphics were different were just in the characters. The characters looked so good. In the original, some of the ones that weren't as good were specifically Jessica and Matt, and in this game, they both had been clearly redone and it was very obvious. I thought Matt's character model and Jessica's character model were so much better than the original. It's insane. And all the other character models just looked so much more realistic. It really added to the game and made it feel more real. The scenery had majorly changed, like how it was all lit by the sun or like the snow. There was just so many details added to the scenery that definitely added to the game. All of their clothing had details that the original wasn't able to get. The detail in the hair was really good. I think it all just looked a lot more realistic, which I think really, really added to the game. It also added to the horror of it, like the Psycho mask. They were able to make that look a lot scarier than the original Psycho mask. And obviously the Wendigos were terrifying when you are able to get more detailed faces. I think the graphics were the greatest difference in this game. I don't think anything else really added as much as that did because it just completely changed the experience from what you would feel playing the 2014 version. It was like looking at it in a different dimension, and it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. Another major difference I noticed was the angles, specifically in the first scene. There were just a lot of moments where they had it shown in different angles than the original did. I feel like if you didn't know the game as well, you probably wouldn't have noticed some of these, but there were so many throughout the game. Of course, a lot of them were still the same, but specifically in the opening scene is where I noticed it. Like, every angle was different for that opening scene. And then throughout it, just the way they would have it shown through a different light, I think it was able to bring to life some parts of the game that you didn't get in the original. One thing that they mentioned they would be changing before the game was released was that they would have the camera following the characters instead of being the movie angles like in the original. I always really liked the movie type angles. I felt like it made it feel more like you were interacting with a horror movie instead of it being a video game. They did this so that you could move the camera in a way so that you could see around more and explore more. Personally, I didn't like this change. I like it more with the movie type angles. I think it makes it a little bit scarier. But I do understand why they did it, and I do think that it added in some ways. There were more areas to explore, like they had promised that there would be. I just noticed that in some of the areas they were a lot bigger with a lot more random paths where you could walk off and find different collectibles. Sometimes they had extra places that didn't have any collectibles, and I was like, why did you feel like you needed to add that? But I'm glad they added more areas. It just kind of added to the experience of getting to find something new or be able to explore for people who had already played the game who wanted more to explore. One critique of the original that people had was that you couldn't run, which seems like something that you would want to have in a horror game. You would want to be able to run. They did have a walk faster feature in the older game where you would hit a button and you could walk very, very slightly faster. In this game, they added running, but they only made it to where you could do it when they wanted you to. So you would be walking and then all of a sudden your character would just start running. And it was a little bit jarring, like it didn't make a lot of sense at some points. It was just like super random. I kind of wish they would have just changed the walk faster to running and you could just have the option to run when you wanted to. But they did add running to the game, so that was different. There were new clues to find. Some of them added to the story, some of them I didn't think really did. I'll be going over some of the ones that I think were more important when I go through the chapters. There were new jump scares that they added, which I think they did really well with the jump scares, because even the old jump scares they changed a little bit because of how they had the screen fixed with the character. They would like move the screen when a jump scare came, and it would like the screen would jump with the jump scare, and I thought it was really beautiful how they did some of them. Like it really looked amazing. And I also do think it added to the jump scares. I loved how they had the motion of the camera with the jump scare. The screen had black bars during the entire game. In the old version, there was only black bars during some of the parts, but I noticed that they had a different aspect ratio for the game. They had tilted angles for some bits that I thought definitely added. I loved all of the tilted angles that they did. I think that's a classic horror move that I think definitely added to this version. For the actual gameplay, they changed some of the controller settings. So in the original, you would move the joystick to which side, which decision you wanted to make. In this version, they had it between two buttons, and they would also move the camera with whatever decision you made, which I thought was really cool. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the camera movement that was added to this game. I think that was just one of the better things, and I didn't dislike any moment really that they did that. I think they did it really beautifully. I think it went with the jump scares, the decision making, the angles. I really think that that was a great add to this version. They added vibration in the controller. In the original there was vibration in the controller, but this one it was like every step you would feel it. I think that that definitely brings the player into the game more, but it does have its faults when it comes to some of the game mechanics with the don't move, which I'll get into. One unique thing I think they did with the controller is they had the light settings change, so depending on what character was playing at the time, the color of the controller would change. I think that was really fun. It took me a second to notice that it was doing this, but every character has a different color with the controller. With all the game settings, they had a bunch of different game settings. One of the main ones I noticed was dialogue history. They had this option where you could look at what lines had been said, I guess in case you missed something, which I thought was fine. I didn't end up using it, but maybe some people did. And then just with the game mechanics like the don't move or the QTEs, or the shooting, you could change how you wanted it to be. I really liked the options you had with the QTEs. You could make it so that it was the same symbol every time. You can make it auto pass. You can make it randomized, so if you're someone who's played the game a lot, you can change it to where the QTEs will change every time, and then it makes it a little bit harder. You could also change where the QTE symbol would pop up on the screen if you wanted to only stay in the center. This isn't something new, but one thing I thought they were going to add that they ended up not was new deaths. There is not a single new death as far as I'm concerned in this game. I really think that would have been something easy to add, and I'm kind of surprised that they didn't decide to do that. Not that they add new deaths for characters maybe, just maybe different ways that they can die. I don't know, they were all the same, and I kind of wish that they had changed that. So music definitely sets the tone for any horror movie, horror game. The original Until Dawn soundtrack is unbelievable. Like, it is so great. Every song fits with every scene. It's just unmatched. And for this remaster, they had said that they were going to be getting a new soundtrack, new sound effects, which definitely changed the vibe of the game 100%. But for me personally, this soundtrack did not hit like the original did. It felt like there were so many moments where the music didn't match what was going on, whether there would be a chase scene and the music wasn't intense enough, or it was supposed to be calm and they were playing really action-packed music. I felt like it just did not have the same vibe. I'm curious if someone who's never played the game before would have thought differently, and maybe it's just because I am so used to the original where all of the music was very different. I just felt like there was a lot of unmatching with the scenes, and there were moments where it was supposed to feel tense that it didn't because the music wasn't there. I knew going into this game that whoever was making the soundtrack had big shoes to fill because the original was just so perfect in my opinion, and I had a feeling I wasn't gonna like it as much, but I really, really did not enjoy a lot of the choices made with the soundtrack in this game. I'll go over some of the most obvious soundtrack differences. There were some moments I liked, which I will also say, but overall, the soundtrack was not as good as the original game, and I kind of wish they would have had the option to have the original music instead of this music. They do have a streamer mode, but that just mutes the music, so there's no option to get that old music back, and I kind of wish that would have been an option. They replaced the opening credit song, Oh Death, with Out of the Shadows. I thought that song was fine. Like, there wasn't a huge difference for me. I think it was mainly the instrumental music that I would have preferred over the new choices they made. It did feel like they were all new sound effects. I couldn't possibly point out everything that was different. One sound effect that really I did notice was the QTE. When you hit the QTE, there was like a bass boom type sound effect. I think I liked this better than the original, but also, like, I don't think it really matters. Like, I think either was fine. Whether it was good or whether it was bad, the music definitely changed a lot of the feel in this new Until Dawn Remaster. I was very excited to see what they were going to be changing with the totems because there's so many opportunities, and they did take the opportunity to change these quite a bit. The first major difference they made to the totems was that instead of just picking it up and seeing the future choice, you would have to find the premonition. It was like this little mini game where you had to find like a spot on the totem so that you could see the future. I was really bad at this mini game, so I didn't really like it that much. I felt like it was just difficult. I don't know if it really added much to the game. Like, I don't know if that was really necessary. The other thing is, like, in the old one, if you had already found the totem and you didn't know and you picked it up, you would not be able to see it, and it would tell you, oh, I already found this totem. With the new one, if you pick it up, you still have to find the premonition, and you might think that you already found it, but you're just not able to find the premonition. So I was always worried that I hadn't found the totem already, and I just, like, was bad at finding the premonition. The other big change they made to the totems was adding the hunger totem, which was fun for people who had already played the game because they get to find all these new totems that we didn't know what they were going to be. In the opening, when Sam finds the board that explains all of the totems, they very annoyingly have the hunger totem spot covered in snow so that you don't get to find out. I thought this was pretty funny, but I did want to find out what they meant. When you find them throughout the game, you realize that the hunger totems are explaining to you Hannah's turning into a Wendigo and how that happened, and giving you little clips that you hadn't seen before. Obviously, the hunger totems were all new. There were some other totems that were new as well. I'll be going over what chapters those are found in as I go through the chapters, but to do so, they had to remove some of the old totems. All the death totems were the same. The guidance totems that were removed were Mike getting his fingers stuck in the bear trap and Emily giving the flare gun to Matt. The lost totem that was gone was Ashley losing her head if she opens the trap door. There were quite a few danger totems gone from the original. One of them was Ashley getting punched by the psycho. One of them was a Wendigo arm trying to get Mike. One of them was a Wendigo attacking Mike. And the last one was Josh turning into a Wendigo. The fortune totem that was gone was Chris being led in by Ashley after he escapes the Wendigo shootout. And then obviously all the hunger totems, like I said, were new. I was pretty happy that they changed some of these just because that's a different thing that people who have played before can find. I kind of wish some of these hadn't been taken out, like Josh turning into a Wendigo or Ashley losing her head, because I feel like those are really important ones that could tell you what to do. But I enjoyed getting to look for different totems. So I knew they were going to be changing the don't move a bit. I knew they were adding a different feature where you could do it differently, and I just didn't really know what to expect with all that. In the original 2014 version, you have to sit there with the controller still, and if you move the blue shine part out of the lines, then you fail the don't move. It's pretty difficult. It takes quite a few practices to do it usually, but it is doable, and there's no way to change it. You have to always have it on the hardest setting, and one wrong move and you're done. They changed that in the new version where it's not necessarily if you move outside the lines, but it's like how much you move outside the lines. So if you are at all moving too far out of the lines, they'll have an amount that you're allowed to be outside the lines, and if you hit 0 on that, not timer, but how much you've moved out of the don't move spot, then you will fail. So it's a little bit more forgiving, but I found this quite a bit harder because it seems really sensitive. Like, you can even change the sensitivity, but anytime the controller vibrated, it would say that I moved. And I'm like literally sitting there completely still. Even if you take down the sensitivity almost all the way, it'll like be really, really stubborn. And it's like impossible to go without failing it, or at least that's what it was for me. I definitely prefer the old don't move in the original game, even though it's not as able to be manipulated to where you can't change the settings with it. But I just didn't like that it was saying I failed when I literally didn't, and it was every time the controller was vibrating. Like, if you want to do that, then just don't put the vibrating in the don't moves, or just don't have it factor into whether or not the player is moving. But I did find this quite annoying, I'm not gonna lie. The other option you had was using the joystick to keep it inside the lines, which I think that's a good alternative option for people who really struggle staying still. I don't really have any complaints with that. It was really just the other don't move where I was like, the vibration is the only reason that it's failing. And the sensitivity change helped, but it didn't feel fair that I had to put it so far down because I literally wasn't moving, it was the vibration. And this was so irritating. And then they also have the option for the don't move where you can auto pass it to where it just plays through and you don't have to move. And no matter what happens, you will make it through the don't move. Which I think is fine for people who don't like the don't move. I wouldn't want to do that because I really enjoy the don't move. But I do think that that was a good ad for people who can choose what they want to do in the moment. I think the don't move is one of my favorite parts of the entire game, and the fact that they ruined it a little bit, I wasn't a huge fan of. I would have liked it had they kept it the same way and just made it to where you could change the difficulty. A lot of the Dr. Hill sequences were very, very similar. It was the same test that you would take. It was the same where you'd pick your fears, pick who you didn't like. All of that was very similar. I don't think there was a lot that they could have changed here. Maybe doing a different therapist activity where you were ranking something else, maybe adding different fears I think would have been really easy to add, but they didn't do any of that. There wasn't a lot that was different. The only thing that I noticed that was different was the pictures of the characters were really different when you're ranking your characters. That's just because the graphics were so much improved. And then the biggest thing that was changed was the fact that you can alter Josh's fate during one of the therapy sessions, which I will get into that more when I explain the chapter differences. I do like that they finally added something that really impacts the game in the therapy sessions, because in the original, there isn't really anything that's super crazy altering in the story. I like that for people who had played the game before, they probably didn't realize that that was going to impact anything because it didn't in the original. So I think that was a really creative ad that I wasn't expecting. I couldn't believe how different the prologue was. Out of all of the chapters in the entire game, the prologue was the most different. I know that they wanted to add more to Beth and Hannah's story so that you got more of a dynamic between their characters and Josh's character. So they did add a lot to the scene, like it went on way longer than the original. And just the way it was filmed, the way it was shown, there was a montage, the music, everything was really different and gave it a really darker vibe. The first big difference I noticed was that it starts out with Beth outside taking out the trash. Here she runs into a deer and you have your first don't move of the game instead of it being with Sam in chapter 1. I did find this don't move a little bit oddly placed because it was like the game had just started and they're already throwing you into a don't move. I don't know, that didn't make a lot of sense for me, but I do like that they added more playtime with Beth. I just don't know if this whole part was necessarily like important. They added a part where you could see Hannah finding the note left from Mike. I do like that they were showing us a little bit more of what was going on before this prank instead of just the prank itself and after. And showing us from Hannah's perspective made us feel a little bit more for the character. They added a scene where Hannah and Beth were moving Josh to the couch, and they also added a bit where Jessica was looking at Hannah with an evilish grin. They really put a darker tone to these characters with this prank, like it really made them look not good. They showed Chris also passed out on the couch with drawings all over his face, and later they added a new clue where you found a camera of all of the friends together and you found out that Emily was the one who drew on his face, but you also got to see a bunch of different pictures, which I really enjoyed that clue. I thought it was fun. As much as I enjoyed getting all of these ads to this prologue, one thing that was really odd to me was the fact that they were just all not saying anything, because they only had the dialogue from the original game and they added so much to the scene. So there was a bunch of moments where they were just weirdly all not talking, specifically with Beth and Hannah. They were just sitting there not speaking, moving Josh to the couch, and it just felt really awkward and didn't make any sense. They probably should have found a way to where they didn't need any speaking, like putting music behind it, or just bring in the actress to do some more lines. Like, it was just really off-putting, the fact that they were not saying anything. Another difference is the note from Mike. Once Beth finds it, it's a completely different note. I think they did this to make him not look as gross, because the original note is not very nice. Then they had this long new montage of Hannah in her room writing in her journal and drinking while the others were getting the prank ready, and they had this music behind it and red lighting. It just felt really evil. Like, I couldn't believe the tone that they took on this. It made it really sad to watch, more sad than the original. Like I said, all the angles were different in this prologue, and it really did have a very different feel to the original. Once the prank happens and Hannah runs out in the woods and Beth runs after her, you play as Beth trying to find Hannah, and there's this new moment where Beth runs into this shed where the flamethrower guy is behind it and it catches on fire and she drops her phone. You can find her phone in the original game, but this whole shed moment was a lot different, and that is where Matt ends up finding her phone later. The sisters still fall off the cliff, but this time there's this slow-mo fall to make it more dramatic, I guess, and that definitely was a little bit different. They added quite a few slow-mo moments in this game, but I think it was just for more of a dramatic feel than the original was. The main difference in Chapter 1 was that they changed at least one trait for each character. When they introduced all of the characters, they have 3 traits that describe them, and a lot of them were different in the remaster. The first character they introduced is Sam. Her traits are the same, except that they changed brave for adventurous. Also, when you're playing as Sam in the beginning, when you're walking to the cable car station, there is a new area to explore with like a truck, and you can find some new clues in that area. Chris also has one trait changed from the original. Instead of loyal, they call him methodical. They changed all of Jessica's traits. Her original ones were confident, trusting, and irreverent, and her new ones were outgoing, driven, and impulsive. Also, for some of the characters, they changed the dynamic they have in the group. So instead of saying Jessica is Mike's new girlfriend, they said that she is just Mike's girlfriend. Emily has one trait changed. Instead of persuasive, she's forthright. And instead of Emily being called Mike's ex, she's called Matt's girlfriend. Matt has 2 traits changed. Instead of motivated and ambitious, he has obliging and dependable. And instead of saying he's Emily's new boyfriend, he's Emily's boyfriend. Mike has 2 traits changed. Instead of intelligent and persuasive, he's called charismatic and brave, and he's also just called just his boyfriend instead of Emily's ex. And Ashley has 1 trait changed. Instead of forthright, she's called sensitive. I was expecting them to change these traits just because it's so easy, and a lot of them have a lot of different traits that you could say. I don't know if I love every change they made, and I'm not exactly sure why some of them they changed all of them and some of them they only changed 1. But I do think that was a fun new ad that they had the opportunity to do. And I enjoyed that they added new places to explore in the beginning with Sam. Chapter 2 starts off with introducing Josh, and he also has all of his traits changed. They used to be thoughtful, loving, and complex, and his new traits are persistent, creative, and playful. I actually think that his old traits were better more than the other characters. Like, I feel like complex really explained him, and thoughtful and loving kind of let you know that he does have a good side, whether or not he is the psycho, which he is. But I do think the new ones apply to him. I just think the old ones were better. The first new totem of the game is found in this chapter by Chris. It's a guidance totem, and it shows Sam hiding instead of running when trying to get away from the psycho. My favorite new thing about Chapter 2 is that they decided to add back the deleted scene. I don't know if this is only there because we pre-ordered the game, because in the old version, everyone who pre-ordered the game also had this deleted scene with Emily and Matt walking to get her bag. I hope they officially added this instead of just the pre-ordered games, but I loved getting to play through this scene the first time because I did not have the pre-ordered version of the 2014 Until Dawn. I think this was a really good ad because people have always wanted it. People were upset that they took it out, so this was a really easy way to add more to the game without having to do much. I don't know why I didn't even consider that they might add back the deleted scene, but they did, so I'm happy about that. In chapter 3, you can find the first hunger totem as Mike. This hunger totem shows Hannah down in the mines after she's fallen and Beth has died, and she's crawling to Beth's grave to dig her up and eat her. It was honestly kind of sad getting to see this perspective, but I did enjoy getting to see how everything happened, even though the story does end up telling you. It was fun to see that. There was also a new clue where there was a baseball that said Josh on it. This was obviously going back to when Sam and Josh are talking about how he played baseball with his sisters in the basement. And then this chapter also had some slow-mo parts, which were originally in real time, but they decided to make it slow-mo for this version. Chapter 4 starts off with Mike chasing after Jessica, and the music here was just not as good as the original. I didn't like it. It didn't feel as intense. It wasn't the worst music choice I think they had, but it definitely changed the feel of this scene in a not good way.
Okay.
Also, Mike can find 2 new totems in this chapter. The first one is a fortune totem that shows Matt using the flare gun to kill the Wendigo, which is helpful because so many people kill him. It is also kind of hard to understand what this totem is trying to say, so I don't know if it's actually that helpful, but it is there, so. And the other totem he can find is the second hunger totem that shows Hannah starting to turn into a Wendigo. You can see her vision going from Wendigo to normal. The first different thing in chapter 5 is that you can find a danger totem that is not in the original. It's found by Mike, and it shows Sam walking to the theater about to be talked to by the psycho. I'm not really sure why they added this as a danger totem because you can't avoid it. I don't really like when they add totems like that because it doesn't really help you. Like, there's no way to avoid this. So I feel like that wasn't a necessary add, but whatever. Another danger totem can be found in this chapter by Matt that's new. It shows Matt trying to save Emily from falling, but he's unable to. I do think that this was a really good totem to add because so many people kill Matt by trying to save Emily. You can hear the dialogue that's happening in the background, so you can hear Emily's voice in this totem, and it tells you that that's who he's trying to save.
Jesus! Come on!
And then one more new totem that you can find is a new guidance totem, and it shows Mike barricading the door, which ends up saving the dog if that's something that you want to do. Well, the Sam chase scene is very similar to the original version. The music in this scene was very different. In the 2014 version, Sam is listening to classical music while she's in the bathtub. In this version, she was listening to a real song. They decided to add music with vocals in this version at times, which I did, I guess, enjoy. I did like the music that Sam was listening to better because it made more sense than listening to classical. But the chase scene music when she's actually getting chased by the psycho was not it. Like, the original was so much better. And I found this being a huge problem with the music. Like I was saying earlier, the intense chase scenes, they were just not as intense as I would have liked.
Are you kidding me? No handle?
It didn't make me feel as on edge as I feel like I should have felt when being chased by a psychopath. This remaster made me realize how much I love the music in the original, so. In chapter 6, you can find a new danger totem as Emily, and it shows Jessica falling over while hiding from the Wendigo, which is very helpful because that ends up killing Jessica and Matt, so that's like really unfortunate if you let that happen. Something I really like in this chapter that they added is that they have a new page of notes in Hannah's journal. Like I said in the prologue, they show her writing in her journal while they're setting up the prank, and now they've added that page into the journal when Ashley finds it later. So you can see what she was writing at that time. Ashley can also find the third hunger totem, and it shows Hannah pretty much as a Wendigo. She's seeing in the Wendigo vision, and she's jumping around with the strength of a Wendigo. There was also a new clue added in the basement that Ashley can find. It's the journal that the therapist shows Josh with all the pictures of his friends when you, as the player, pick and choose who your favorite is. I'm not sure why this was added. I don't know if it adds that much, but it is a new clue to find as Ashley. Chapter 7 was the least different out of all of them. Like, I didn't find much that was worth mentioning. But you can, as Emily, find a new lost totem that shows Chris watching the flamethrower guy die. Again, I don't think this totem was necessary because there's no way to avoid that. I don't think they should have gotten rid of the old one and showed something that didn't matter. The main thing I noticed different about Chapter 7 is that they force you to find Beth's head. In the original, they just show it really obviously on screen, betting that you'll find it, but you can miss it. In this version, they forced Emily to go up to it so that you have to find that clue. I do think that that's really a vital clue, so I am glad that they made this unmissable because you miss a lot of the story if you don't find Beth's head. Chapter 8 starts out with Emily finding a new danger totem. It shows Emily right before she gets chased. So you literally find the totem and then 2 seconds later you witness the totem, and it's not something that you can avoid. So I think this was my least favorite totem ad. Like, it just was so unnecessary. Like, why would they get rid of the old danger totems to add this? One thing I love that they added about Emily getting chased by the Wendigo is before she does, they show a lot of different shots of the Wendigo, so you're like, what is that, before she gets chased? I think that this would have been really fun to have in the original game because this is the moment that they're introducing the Wendigo truly for the first time, and it was really frightening. These Wendigos looked really scary in this version compared to the original for sure. I think the music during this scene was the worst out of all of the new music because it just was non-existent. Like, you couldn't even hear it, and you're literally being chased by a Wendigo, and it was not any action music at all. It just felt like there was no music. I did not like this selection at all for Emily's chase. I didn't love the music during the Chris chase scene either, but it wasn't as bad as the Emily chase scene in my opinion. But both music choices were very different than the original. While those music choices were not good, one thing I really love that they did with the music is if Emily gets bit, they decided to add this like rising tension music during that whole conversation, and I think that was the best music ad of the entire game. It really made it scary, and for someone who doesn't know if the Wendigo bite is harmful or not, that would really freak them out, I think. I already knew because I'd already played the game, but I really loved how they added that music there, and I really noticed it.
If the Wendigo bit you, you could turn into one of those things.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
He said it was from eating each other. Remember, he said that.
Is that how it works?
Yes, it happens. If it bit you, you're gonna turn into one, and then you're gonna turn on us. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!
One of the biggest changes to Chapter 8 is that if Ashley was shot by Chris in the Saw game, then she usually, in the original, would just leave him out on the porch to die and not be upset. In this version, they made her more far away from the door, and she's kind of pondering everything that had gone on, and when Chris begs her to open the door, she runs to it, but she's too late. I know that in the original, the creators of the game were saying that this is kind of what they wanted for Ashley's character, where she was just in shock and didn't actually mean to kill him. I think this version made it look a little bit less ruthless. I'm not sure if I loved it because I kind of like the idea that she's mad in the original, even though it's terrible. But this did make me feel more bad for her character. And when he dies, when she doesn't get through the door in time, she is more upset than she is in the original. This was a huge change they made. I mean, in the original, she steps back away from the door, and this one, she's running to the door to try to save him. But she doesn't get there in time, so he still ends up dying. I don't know if I love this change, but it definitely was a big change. Then the change that everyone's talking about is during the therapy session in Chapter 8, when Josh is asked about what he's done. The player is given 2 options to pick from between "it was just a game" and "I'm so sorry." And if you pick the "I'm so sorry" option, then Josh will be remorseful for what he did. And if not, then he will not. Now, when I played the game, I was not given the "I'm so sorry" option. I was given "it was just a game" versus "they need to change," which neither of those are really remorseful and will lead to him turning into a Wendigo. So throughout the game, you need to get Josh to the point where he will be remorseful, or else you'll have no chance to save him later on. I do love that they made this change because this is like something that everyone wanted, because Josh never gets a happy ending and it's really sad, which I'll get into that ending when I get to Chapter 10, but I do think that this was a great ad that they made, and it's kind of hard to get it because sometimes you don't get the option of that choice, so. And I love that someone who's played the game before didn't really know how to save him because it was a new option that they had, so. In Chapter 9, you can find 2 more hunger totems. One is found by Mike, and it shows Hannah attacking a deer as a Wendigo. This could be the deer that Mike and Jess find on their way to the cabin. I think that's what it's implying. And the other hunger totem is found by Sam, and it shows Hannah as the Wendigo grabbing Jess when Mike is chasing after her. There's also a figurine clue that you can find on a chessboard as Mike when he's being hunted in the sanatorium. It does get you a trophy. I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be, but you get a trophy if you find it. And then one other thing I noticed that was different from the original in this chapter, if Ashley wanders off by herself towards the trap door, in the original, like, that trap door is moving so much, like someone is knocking on it really aggressively, and in this one it was barely moving. Like, especially if you stay there and you find the totem and you're sitting there, it'll eventually just not do anything, like it'll just sit there. I'm not sure if they did that to make it so that you would go up to it not realizing that that's where a Wendigo is hiding, but I did did notice this, and I thought that it was really interesting that they decided to change that. Chapter 10 had a couple different places that were new to explore. The main one I noticed was an area behind Hannah's journal, if you go to find Hannah's journal, but there was nothing back there. I don't know why they added this area when there was nothing to find there, but you know what? You can go back there. I think it's supposed to be where Hannah would live. I'm not exactly sure why they added that. During the Jessica and Matt chase, the music was different. I did not like it as much as the original. That's not very shocking, but I just didn't like it at all. I didn't think it was intense enough.
Come on, Jess.
The last hunger totem is found in this chapter by Sam, and it shows Hannah grabbing Josh when he is taken when he's with Mike. The finale of the game was pretty much the same. The main thing I noticed was that the Wendigos just looked so much more terrifying. Like, it was scary to look at them. Like, their faces were so detailed, and their screaming at you was so much more intense than the original. And if you've played the original 2014 Until Dawn, like, that scene is terrifying. The fact that they were able to make it scarier than it already was is very impressive to me. I think the Wendigos looked the scariest in this scene out of the entire game. And the last things, once the game ends, there are a couple different end credit scenes that you can get. One of them is the same, where Josh ends up turning into a Wendigo. That one was in the original version. If you were able to get Josh to be remorseful for his actions and not get him killed, then you'll get a scene showing Josh not becoming a Wendigo, still in the mines, and you can hear a voiceover from Dr. Hill, kind of implying that he will get a second chance.
Isolation. Well, I hope for your sake, Joshua, that you can find redemption.
There's also an end credit scene if Sam survives that shows her years later in her room waking up. It shows how the events have affected her, and she's got pill bottles everywhere, and she wakes up and she has this scar on her arm that she's trying to wipe away, and she can't seem to wipe it away. It seems that she's traumatized from the events, and someone's calling out her name, and it very much sounds like Dr. Hill, but I'm not sure if that's what it's supposed to be.
Sam.
I did not know that this was going to be in the game. This was so random to me. I was like, what? When I saw this scene. I think they're trying to imply that there's going to be an Until Dawn 2, or showing that Sam will get another game. I'm not exactly sure what this scene was supposed to mean. They brought back Hayden Panettiere to film it. So I think they're implying that they're going to be doing another game, but I'm not exactly sure what this scar moment and everything was supposed to mean. But you do get that end credit scene if Sam survives. I love that they added more variations to the ending where you could get different end credit scenes, and I loved the increase in quality of the police interviews. They looked really good, and I could tell the difference between the original and these. So that's all the changes that I noticed playing the Until Dawn Remaster. There were so many more than I thought. I thought it was going to be maybe a couple totems changed, and then the graphics were going to be improved. I was so surprised by how much was different. I really enjoyed playing this remaster. It felt like I was in a different dimension of Until Dawn, playing like, it was a little bit weird playing the game, but I enjoyed it. I think for people who have played the game, it's definitely worth it to play it for a different experience, and for people who haven't played the game, this is a way higher quality version than the original. I'll always love the original more because that's just what I'm used to, and the music is way better, but I do think that this was a good remaster, and it held up to the original with the story, which it just kept the story the same, but I do like that they did change a couple things. Since it just came out, people are still finding new things about it. There's so many more things probably to discover in the game, which I'm excited to do. So if there are any discoveries or clues or things that are different that I missed, please let me know. Okay, that's all. Bye.